We continue today in the David narrative from 2 Samuel, the 11th chapter, beginning in the first verse. Listen now for a word from God to the church this day. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go to battle, David sent Joab with his officers and all Israel with him. They ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained at Jerusalem. It happened late one afternoon when David rose from his couch and was walking about on the roof of the king's house that he saw from the roof a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. David sent someone to inquire about the woman. It was reported, "This is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite." So David sent messengers to get her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Now she was purifying herself after her period. Then she returned to her house. The woman conceived, and she sent and told David, "I am pregnant." So David sent word to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked how Joab and the people fared and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. But Uriah slept at the entrance of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and did not go down to his house. When they told David, Uriah did not go down to his house, David said to Uriah, "You have just come from a journey. Why did you not go down to your house?" Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah remain in booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do such a thing." Then David said to Uriah, "Remain here today also, and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day. On the next day, David invited him to eat and drink in his presence and made him drunk. And in the evening, he went out to lie on his couch with the servants of his Lord, but he did not go down to his house. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter, he wrote, "Set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him, so that he may be struck down and die." Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. You got that one, okay. All right, let us pray. Oh God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. As a boy, David had imagined himself here at the pinnacle of success. The long days of sheep work are over. No more risky slingshot duty, no more nights off fending lions, no more days of shoveling sheep stool in the fields. No more dreaming about the big house, the royal bling, the easy life. No, David has moved into the big house, into the top slot of upper management with more than enough stock options and assets to keep him protected from the fears that most of us face. The fear of not having enough, or not achieving enough, or not being enough. David has moved into the place where other people come at his beck and call to do the shoveling, to do the fending, and to do the risking on his behalf. And so today, even though most kings like David are out in the fields of war, David is relaxing back on the couch, watching a little ESPN, flipping through the newspapers, catching up on the latest news from the war front. Sure, there is work to be done, but for David, that work involves moving the right people to the right places, like pawns on a chessboard. And there's no reason why that management can't take place from the comfort of the presidential suite. iPhone in hand, wet bar over to one side, royal dancers not too far from sight, and a veranda view of the city laid out before him. This is the life. And David certainly intends to enjoy it. And why shouldn't he? The road to the top has been a long, difficult one, full of battles, assassination attempts, and the loss of people he loves. Along the way, David has felt the insecurity of employment, like some of us. He has known the anxiety of volatile markets, like some of us. He has longed for stability, like some of us. You can't blame David for taking some time to enjoy the fruits of his labors, to enjoy what it feels like not to worry about having to pay the bills, saving for his kids' college education, having enough to put away for retirement, not to worry about whether your job will still be there when you wake up tomorrow, not to have to worry about your future, to enjoy the security that some of us can only imagine. And how easy, how logical it must be for David to begin to feel that he deserves this time, that he deserves this power, that he deserves this privilege. So easy that the power and the privilege and the time quickly become normal to David. Sending for cabinet leaders, taking small rogue states, commanding the armed forces, and ruling all the people becomes regular, commonplace, ordinary. So when David, most likely bored from lying around all day on the couch, spies that woman bathing on the roof, I don't see any moment of ethical reflection. I don't see any wrestling of the conscience. There's no ethical decision to be made when that woman is to David just another object to be sent for, to be taken, to be commanded, to be ruled over, just another thing that he thinks he deserves. There is no regret when David launches a cover-up to hide his deed. There's no remorse when David's hands are stained with the blood of Uriah. Do not let this matter trouble you, he will say to his troubled underlings, for the sword devours now one and now another. David has become so accustomed to the lifestyle, the privilege, and the power that all of these things, the taking of what he wants, the using and abusing of people in his city, and even the killing, have become just the way things are. And when authority and privilege and unilateral power become nothing more than the way things are, there is no sin to be confessed. There is no guilt to be assuaged. There is no evil to be rejected. All David can see is himself. And while it's easy for us to see modern day examples of presidents so entitled that they refuse to accept the outcome of an election, or billionaires so infatuated with themselves that they'll shoot themselves into space on the most phallic-looking rocket ship the world has ever seen, you don't have to be a king of a people or the president of a nation or a billionaire tycoon to find yourself in David's shoes. Unilateral power and privilege can nibble away at each of us, injecting their venom into our view of the world, slowly numbing us to the horror, the absurdity, the incongruity of the world around us. I see it in our city when we become numb to the murder, satisfied when the victims are not related to me. I see it in our nation where we seem more satisfied with Black Lives Matter t-shirts or Me Too bumper stickers than we are at doing what it takes to address the racial wealth gap or equipping prosecutors to better handle cases of sexual assault. I see it in the worst of social media where we critique from the comfort of our own couches, cultivating the right personal brands without getting our hands messy with actual change in the world. The more we chase after status or stuff, the more we insulate ourselves from the pain of the world until we are numb to suffering around and maybe within us. Until we are no longer shocked by our own pain, much less by the pain of others. Until this way of living seems little more than the way things are. It might not have been this way for David had he been able to identify with just one of the victims of his royal power. If he had rested long enough from the taking of what he desired, the planning of the cover-up, and the commanding of his victims, long enough to see his world from that different vantage point. Perhaps if he had looked through the eyes of Bathsheba and imagined the hell that he created for her instead of sending for and taking, and as far as I can tell, assaulting her. Or if he had generated power with ethical people like Uriah instead of at their expense. Uriah, who resisted participation in David's cover-up, who would not eat or drink or lie with his wife while the ark and the people of Israel remained in harm's way. Or if he had dared to imagine God's perspective. David, my beloved, I made you king to heal my people, not harm them. I gave you commandments not to prevent you from becoming the person you long to be, but to protect you from settling for what you are not. It might not have been this way for David had he recognized his own privilege, checked his own power through relationships, or viewed the world through the vision of the other. And it doesn't have to be this way for us either. We can imagine this tale through the eyes of those harmed by unchecked power. That's probably why this scandalous story is preserved here in our holy texts. So we can imagine how Bathsheba suffered. So we can imagine how Uriah fell. So we can imagine just how deeply God was grieved by the abuse of power that God gives us to act for healing and justice in the world. This past week, the Build organization reconvened with a few leaders from each member institution across the city. It was so good to get together after being apart for so long. Reverend George Hopkins of the Sowebo Community Church opened the gathering with a reflection from his childhood. He told us that one of his earliest memories was as a 6-year-old child when his family was evicted from their home in Cherry Hill. I've never been evicted from my home. I've never lived in Cherry Hill. But as my eyes watered and I felt the lump in my throat, I could imagine standing there in front of the house. Imagine what that might have felt like. Imagine how scared or angry or worried I might have been. Reverend Hopkins also told us that his mother had them all singing a hymn together that morning. I shall not be moved. As their things were put out on the street, they sang the hymn, I shall not be moved. His mother must have known that imagination is a powerful thing. Whole worlds are created with the imagination. Little boys who watch their world undone might imagine a different world that they are capable of building with just the right vision. So when we gather on a Sunday morning and we sing to each other the truth that every person is made in the image of God, and we tell each other that God don't make no junk, that you were made to be a blessing, and we imagine ourselves making hard choices, taking foolish risks, holding on to faith that must be believed before it can be seen through the eyes of Abraham and Sarah, or Deborah and Moses, or Joshua and Rahab, or David and Esther, or Joseph and Mary, or Jesus and his disciples, or Susanna and Paul. We hear of their choices and the grace that God enabled them to imagine a world beyond the one they had inherited, to receive a life that too many give up on too early. Then I know that it's the community that gives us the right things to dream about, to hope for, to chase after, the community that helps us check our privilege, see the world through more than just my own eyes or your own eyes. Imagine the planet and its people getting what we all need together instead of just what I want or you want at the expense of others. Imagining together that the world has enough food to go around. Imagining that the city has enough hands to raise all of our children. Imagining that the church has enough grace to abide with each other. Imagining together until that imagination becomes the belief that we've already been gifted with grace and love and hope and healing, everything that we need to be whole right here in cleansing water, in broken bread, in tears and hugs and humanity shared together.